A three-man rush, no, a four-man rush for Seattle. Favre pumps once, again under pressure. Fires one deep over the middle into traffic for Coles. He battles for it, and it's knocked away. And the Jets turn it over on downs. Kelly Jennings there in coverage. And it'll be 1st and 10 inside the red zone for Seattle with 2 minutes and 12 seconds to go.
Jeff Robinson to John Ryan, the holder. There's the snap, the spot. The kick is up by Lindamari. It's plenty long, and it is good.
1st and 10 at the 45 of Seattle. Favre again throws one deep up the right seam, and that pass intended for Kochery, intercepted. Picked off at the 15-yard line, and that will once and for all kill the Jet hopes today. Mike Holmgren wins in his final game at Quest Field. And the Jets fly home out of first place in the AFC East.
And one of the more painful memories of the Eric Mangini era, the loss to the Seattle Seahawks in what turned out to be the second to last game of the season for the Jets. A season that started off with so much promise with Brett Favre coming in and ended in some, I would think, atypical frustration for Jet fans. So we left you with Herm Edwards in his final season in 2005. They go 4-12. Then Edwards decides he wants to leave the organization. They come to an agreement with the Kansas City Chiefs who hire him, and the Jets get compensation for that. So for the next head coach, the Jets now are looking for another young guy, a dynamic guy who's going to be with the organization for a while. And also they were looking for a new GM as well. So as GM, they hire Mike Tannenbaum. Now, Tannenbaum was hired by them in 1997 as the Director of Player Contract Negotiations. Well, in 2006, they make him the General Manager, succeeding Terry Bradway, who was the General Manager before that. And as head coach, they decided to bring in Eric Mangini. Now, Mangini was a Patriot guy who was the defensive coordinator under Bill Belichick. And Belichick didn't think he was ready to be head coach, so there was quite a bit of unhappiness with Belichick. He viewed it as the ultimate betrayal that Mangini would leave, and especially that he would leave and go to the Jets. Belichick was very unhappy with that. Nonetheless, the tension that was already there between the Jets and Belichick actually got much worse, while Mangini now had his own team to kind of shape in the image of what he had learned under Belichick, which he learned obviously a lot, and he spoke glowingly about his relationship with Belichick. But again, Belichick was just very unhappy with Mangini that he decided to take the job. So under Mangini, the Jets struggled early to a 4-4 start in 2006, but they came together in the second half of the season, which included a victory over Belichick's Patriots in New England. Now that victory snapped the Jets' 7-game losing streak against the Patriots, and it kind of ignited the Jets to a 6-2 second half of the season, where they finished 10-6, clinching a playoff spot in the process. The Patriots didn't have to wait long to get the revenge on the Jets after losing to them at home during the regular season. They hosted the Jets in the wild card game and proved that the regular season was just a fluke, as they pretty much had their way, got their revenge, and pounded the Jets 37-16. But nonetheless, you had Mangini having a very successful year in his first year as head coach. All right, but as had been the case with the Jets the last few years, they have a good year, bad year type of scenario or format that they had followed. That followed, after their playoff year in 2002, followed after their playoff year in 2004, and certainly now after their playoff year in 2006. 2007 was a down year. It started with a resounding thud as the Patriots, on their way to a perfect regular season, totally embarrassed the Jets 38-14 in the home opener at the Meadowlands. Again, that was the Jets' 7th straight home loss to New England, and kind of set the tone for just a very confusing season where the direction of the organization was just not understood. After a 10-6 season in 2006 under Mangini, and a pretty successful offseason that included drafting Darrelle Revis, 2007 was supposed to be a year that the team took the next step from being, a good team to a Super Bowl contender, and that didn't happen. However, that didn't happen as far as win-loss, as they wound up with a 4-12 record in 2007. However, they did do some smart things. They signed Thomas Jones, who rushed for over 1,100 yards, but the team was still inconsistent offensively and defensively struggled to put pressure on the quarterback Their 29 sacks were 25th in the league, and they were unable to stop the run as they allowed the 4th most rushing yards in the league as well. So in 2008, the Jets decide that they don't really trust Chad Pennington to be their quarterback of the future. They have a chance to go out and get Brett Favre and bring him on the team, and that's what they do. So by obtaining Favre, the Jets released Pennington, who was picked up by the Dolphins. Now the Dolphins had an awful 2007, worse than the Jets. They finished at 1-15. And Pennington at that point in his career had consistent arm problems, which is why the Jets just weren't confident going forward with him. He couldn't really deliver the out pattern, which is a big part of being a quarterback. He couldn't do it consistently, so the Jets didn't think there was much left in the tank for him. And in bringing in Favre, they knew they had a quarterback that had won a Super Bowl, and the Jets were viewing it, hey, you know what, we don't really care about 2 years from now, 3 years from now. This year we're going for it. We're going to bring in Brett Favre. Another thing the Jets did is they sharpened their defense by bringing in Pro Bowl defensive tackle Chris Jenkins. Now, Jenkins made an immediate impact on the defense as they all of a sudden became a team that was very strong defensively, where the year before they had a lot of different problems stopping the run. However, the biggest break for the Jets in 2008, they really had no part in doing themselves, as Tom Brady was lost for the season after suffering a torn knee in the Patriots season opener. So you have a 2008 season where the Jets are figuring Favre will help them get over the hump against Brady and the Patriots. Now Brady's eliminated from that equation. And you have a Patriot team that has an unknown Matt Castle in a quarterback. And the Jets kind of all of a sudden became more of a favorite. They still weren't the absolute favorite, but they became more of a favorite to win the division. The Patriots still had a lot of veteran defensive players. And again, you have to remember, they went undefeated the year before in 2007 during the regular season. So, under Favre, the Jets struggled a little bit early, but then they really caught fire. They're sitting at 8-3 after 11 games. Favre had a completion percentage of 71%, a quarterback rating of 94, and 20 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. So the move had worked so far. Favre was clearly a difference maker in the Jets season. However, unknown to anyone at the time, a shoulder injury wound up hindering Favre, and the rest of the season he was very inconsistent. In the final 5 games, Favre threw just 2 touchdown passes to 9 interceptions, and his completion percentage dropped all the way down to 55%. His rating fell to 5.2, and the Jets wound up losing 4 of the last 5 games against very mediocre competition. You know, the Niners weren't a very good team. The Seahawks weren't a very good team. They just barely beat the Bills. They just struggled against teams that they normally, you would have thought in the beginning of the season, would have beaten. It started with a home loss against a very mediocre Denver team, and it went on from there. However, one of the worst parts about this season is on the final day of the year, the Jets could have still made the playoffs if they beat the Dolphins and some other things happened. However, Chad Pennington and the Dolphins, who were 1-15 the year before, come into the Meadowlands, beat the Jets, and somehow win the division a year after finishing 1-15. The Patriots won 11 games, without Brady, but they wind up in a tie with the Dolphins, and the Dolphins owned the tiebreaker. So the Dolphins wind up winning the AFC East, and the Jets, with all the promise of their 8-3 start, and it looked like at one point during the season, after beating the Patriots and the Titans in back-to-back games on the road and standing with an 8-3 record, that they would come out of the AFC, or at least have home field advantage, or that at that point they were the best team in the AFC. Favre's injury, unknown at the time, and he really struggled down the stretch, and that was a huge difference. The Jets went from one of the Super Bowl contenders at 8-3 to a team that didn't even make the playoffs at 9-7. But more than that, it was just kind of typical of what the Jet mantra was. Play well early, look like they're about to be a difference maker, and then down the stretch, things seem to have fallen apart. It happened to him in 1997. It happened to him in 2000. It happened to him in 2001, but they were able to rally and make the playoffs by winning the final game of the year. And then in 2002, kind of the opposite happened, where they got off to a bad start and then took off at the end. But he had inconsistencies in 2003. 2004 was a year where you thought things were getting better, and then they have a down year. Then they'd have an up year in 2006, then they'd have a down year in 2007. Now, after the Favre year, the Jets fired Eric Mangini because of the inconsistency and the collapse, and they figured, you know what, there's got to be a reason why this keeps happening. We're going to keep changing until we find a coach and a leader that develops consistency throughout the regular season, and they didn't think that Mangini was that guy. After 3 years, and again, Mangini wound up with a losing record as a head coach as well. The Jets were not convinced that he was the guy. So the Jets they fire Mangini after the 2008 season. But again, I think when you talk about the Mangini era, you look at the talent that he had on his team and the talent kind of that he left Rex Ryan with. They had a very good running game with Thomas Jones and Leon Washington. Their defense was pretty good with Revis and Chris Jenkins and some good young linebackers and David Harris and so on. So even though that Mangini, they kind of fell apart at the end of the year, there was still a bit of a bright light kind of coming. And when they hired Rex Ryan, I think that's what they were looking for, a brash young coach that was different than Mangini, who was so hands-on and so kind of suffocating that the players just couldn't take it anymore. And I think the organization wanted to go just a totally different direction.